We'll start with you, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Coon, and I'm the developer on the Mercantile Loft, and looking forward to telling everybody how easy this was.
I'm John Guidugli, President and CEO of the Hamilton Community Foundation.
My name is Brandon Saurber. I'm the Assistant to the City Manager for the City of Hamilton.
Good afternoon, Pat Moeller, Mayor of the City of Hamilton and a proud partner.
Okay, hello everybody, and I'm sure glad to be here. I came to Hamilton probably 6 years ago. An architect friend of mine had gotten a hold of me and said there was a project down in Hamilton that he felt was right in our wheelhouse. And I came down, looked at the building, and the building had been vacant for a while. And from the pictures that I'm going to show here, this building's really no different than most buildings in most cities throughout Ohio and the Midwest. Fortunately, the city had the foresight to invest money and purchase the buildings from a previous owner who was going to tear them down, and they saved them, and then they incentivized myself to buy the building and for literally $1, and they did a TIF, and that's what helped me to do a lot of the structural repairs to kind of get started, and that gave me time to go through and make a real assessment of what we had to do. So, all right. Okay, so there's downtown Hamilton. That's literally right across the street from our building, and you can see we'd removed the windows. We decided to restore all the wood windows. We got tax credits for restoring this building. It was state and federal tax credits, and without these tax credits, this wouldn't have been possible. But we literally took all the wood windows out. That's all first growth wood. Restored all the windows, put them back in. They're all working, and they're actually better than brand new. And they'll be here another 100 years from now. And you can see that's off to the right. That's the newer windows in and during the restoration stage. On the inside of this building, a lot of tin. Here in the Midwest, they put tin in a lot of the ceilings. And the tin was actually in really good shape. It was just the paint that was a problem. So we blasted that with baking soda, and it wasn't really abrasive, but it cleaned it all off, removed any mold, and we had a nice surface to work with. And you can see the steps here, the historic steps. Most of the steps, the railings were removed. What we had done was we took a piece of this metal out, took it to a local foundry here in Hamilton, and he replicated it, and then we just mass-produced that and redid the steps and the atrium railings. And I've got some other pictures here to show, what we're able to do. Here you can see when I mentioned this is the common area. All these floors were covered up probably 80 years ago, and there was a giant skylight on the roof, which they had roofed over 3 or 4 times, and all the floors were infilled, and we decided to remove that infill and open that up and reinstate everything. And we thought, even though we gave up quite a bit of square footage, that was really the marquee part of this building, was that phenomenal common area along with the skylight. And our whole idea is to bring as much light into these units as possible, and this skylight was going to help us to achieve that. You can see some of the ornamental plaster work that we made molds of, and we were able to save the we were basically able to save the profiles, and then we just mass-produced brand new plaster and reinstated everything. But you can see in the middle the how the roof had actually caved in, and it had been like this for probably, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years. And believe me, when you walk a banker through here and tell them, look, I want you to lend me, $6 million to do this, they're not exactly running to get you to sign the dotted line. You've got to buy them into a vision to say, look, this is a project with good bones. We've got the capability to save this structure and to still make it profitable. And again, without the state and the federal tax credits, this would have been a non-starter, and we'll kind of go over that with the further presentation here. Here's just some more looks at that the roof that was caving in, and believe me, it was quite a task to take all that out, but the end result was phenomenal. We even mass-produced some of these plaster tops or cornices that went on the tops of these plates, and we reinstated all that. So when you came back through, now you'd never know anything was a replica. It just was a perfect match. Again, I just show a lot of the ceiling just because, when you see what it looks like afterwards, you're thinking when you walk through a building like this, there's no way we could save our building, but that's the reason I show some of these pictures to say, yes, it can, and this is really what tells the story in the building, and that's really what helps us to, lease the unit out, because it becomes a sense of place. Just some, work on the outside, restoring some of the stone, and you can see from this picture, SHP Architects took in phase 1, took the bottom retail space, and they were actually a pretty easy sell. The Dingledines walked through here, and they said, this is exactly what we want, and they made this place home, and it was like a real home run for everybody, for them to sign a lease before we'd even completed the project. Just some closer up views of how we finished off the outsides. Again, we're reinstating all this just how it was, but a lot of people think, you know what, it's going to cost too much money to do that. But that's what you've got these tax credits for, so you can put in everything back to its sense of time. And we were able to achieve that here, and it's really not a whole lot more expensive. I mean, we just do projects like this whether we get tax credits or not. It's really the only right way to do it. So after a while, that's how we do everything. This is a shot of the interior of a SHP space. Again, a building that's 130 years old, and it's pretty amazing, how you can convert this. These are just some of the finished ceilings. This is that space that I showed earlier. This is the conference room. This is actually where we're having the telecast from right now. But you can see that's not a painting or a watercolor. I mean, that's the actual picture of the building that's 130 years old that everybody thought should be torn down. Look at the beautiful space we have here. They did get LEED certified. I believe it was silver, and they were pretty proud of that for this space. But we kept all the metal ceilings and brought all the natural light in all the way to the back of the building. And when you work along with your architect in the State Historic Preservation Office, it was really pretty much flawless, and it was a pretty smooth transaction. So what I'd say to people out there that have buildings, they're thinking, well, I don't know if we could do that or not. Believe me, SHPO and your architects, they make the transaction actually pretty smooth, to where they want this project restored just as much as you do. So I mean, they really become a partner. Instead of granite, we went with the recycled glass tops on the countertops, and you could actually even see some of the names and bottle numbers on some of the bottles, which is pretty cool. And like I said, that's the outside space along with the bike rack and everything outside. But here's the space of SHP before, and that's the same space after, with a cork floor, and again, the glass going up to the top but not penetrating through the historic ceiling, and we were able to carry all that natural light all the way back. They used recycled carpet, and even the conference table that we're on was taken out of an old high school gymnasium that they had torn down, but they recycled the benches to make a nice table here. Here's just some more shots of the space, and you can see how open everything is. And again, this is a building that's old, and here's a nice before and after shot. There's before and there's after. I mean, it's just that cool, and in a lot of cases, I say just that easy. Just the finished spaces there, and again, this a lot of shots of the retail. But when you do these projects, I like to do mixed use. I like to do housing on the second, third, even fourth floors. However high up. But your space on the ground floor, you need that retail space, and so it's just a mixed use of both. Again, and I promote into all the cities, you want to live, work, and play downtown, and what better way to come back from the depths of these old buildings than to create something that everybody wants to be a part of. This is a shot that this is my money shot. This was I walked my wife through here and she literally cried, and I don't try to make her cry all the time, but she cried. But This is what it looked like after we got it framed out. And we popped some skylights in. And this is the finished space. And these are live workspaces. You have kitchen and living room and bathroom on the first level, and down below in the garden level, you've got your 2 bedrooms or a bedroom and a workspace area and a restroom. And then you've got the area outside that's a common area. Here's one of the condos before, and then this is the condo after, or the apartment. And sorry, I shouldn't call them condos. They're apartments. And you can see the wood trim and the plaster walls. We just reinstated all that, and we were able to use a lot of the fabric that was in this building. And again, where everybody thought these should be torn out, I mean, some of these windows are 10 and 12 foot tall. To get a brand new unit in there, I mean, the cost would be unbelievable. I was able to restore these for about 70% of the cost of a brand new window. But I know 10 years from now, a brand new window you'd probably have problems with. And these are going to go on for, 50, 60 years from now. My grandkids will worry about how to restore them again. It's just what some of the units look like with the granite countertops. And what I did here was I showed an $8 million project, and this was based on my tax credit funding. I showed the percentage from the TIF in the city of Hamilton, and then I also got state and federal tax credits. And I also got a conservation easement, and we were able to do that here. And they actually become a partner, just like your tax credit partners. And I would say to anybody, if you need to really get an architect, an accountant, and an attorney that know exactly what they're doing to make all this work. But they're out there. You just want to make sure. A lot of people say they can do this, but ask them how many projects they've done, and if they haven't done at least 10 or 12, I'd move on to somebody that has, because it's not worth the risk, because these tax credits come in at the end, not at the beginning. It's a reimbursement, and a lot of people need to understand that. So you've got to put all the money up front. You just get reimbursed for this. So is that it?
Yep, that's the last slide.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve. And it's a wonderful project. I definitely advise everyone to come to Hamilton and take a look at it and the rest of the wonderful city. This is my first time in Hamilton today, and so far I've been pleasantly pleased and surprised by how wonderful the city is. So the next part of our webinar today is going to be a kind of a panel discussion among the members here today. We're going to have a few questions to kind of start off with, but please feel free to send any questions in that you have so that we can get them answered as well, and just type them into our chat box. First off, for anyone here, how did this relationship begin, and who took the first steps in creating it?
This is the mayor of Hamilton, Pat Moeller. It was a city council with vision back in the late 90s who took the chance, bought the building before the wrecking ball came in, and saw this building as being part of a revitalized downtown. So the first step was the city getting this building, and then the city looking for various partners to do something with it. It used to be an old department store back when I was growing up. I didn't get a chance to see all the pictures that Steve showed, but it was in very, very poor shape, and the city took a chance on it.
Thank you, Mayor. The second question that we have here is, what reservations did any of the partners have in going into this relationship here? Who wants to start off?
John.
This is John Guidugli with the Hamilton Community Foundation. This was certainly not a project that we anticipated getting involved with. I mean, we were aware of the project as kind of a community partner. Actually, we were at some of the first meetings when the city purchased the building back in the late 90s. I remember walking through it and seeing the shape that it was in. There were certainly more birds living in this building, I think, than there were anywhere else in downtown. And it was a challenge to start with. And but our understanding was that the project was moving forward, although a little bit slower than people had hoped. And we didn't see ourselves as being involved until I guess really when things were beginning to move forward and it looked like this was really going to happen. Financing became an issue, and we were asked to take a look at it. And about 4 or 5 years ago, the foundation made a strategic decision to get involved in economic development activities throughout the community, and this seemed to fit within that purview once we decided to do that. And we treated some financing that we provided for this as basically an investment in the community, a community-related investment. So while we're about making grants to nonprofit organizations, this was a loan that we made to a for-profit organization with interest attached to it, so that we got a return on our investment, so that we could do more grant making in the community. But we were able to get the project moving forward, and I think that was really key, because we were at a critical point and it wasn't going to go forward without that. But I would say we were a little reluctant initially, but once we looked at it and we saw that Steve and his group had done all their homework, the city was behind it 100%, the community was behind it, it just made sense for us to be involved as well.
Any comments from anyone else? City?
On behalf of the city, we're very glad the Hamilton Community Foundation did step up. They've been truly a guardian angel for our city. I hope that all of your cities, that wherever you live, that you've got an organization with the Hamilton Community Foundation which will help you with so many projects. It's through them that we're here. And I wish you all were here to actually see this project.
Can I comment?
Sure, go ahead, Steve.
Actually, John was right. We had I had made the statement to the foundation that, look, I had jumped off the mountain without a parachute, and halfway down, I'm screaming for somebody to throw me a parachute, and I was serious when I said that. We had commitments from banks. I had a tax credit partner that agreed to buy the state and federal credits along with the easements. And after we had started the project, the economy kind of went into the tank, and I didn't stop working. I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. I kept going when everybody else thought I should stop, and that's when I went to the foundation, and they literally, within a week, I had a deal, and we were able to continue on, and phase one would not have happened without them, and phase one was so successful, we rolled right on over to phase two, and now we've got the foundation. We paid them back in July, and they got all their money plus all their interest, and I mean, it was a win-win for the community, for this project, and financially for us. We were able to, get back, some of the money that we had invested, and able to do other projects. Now, I'd say since we'd done these 3 buildings here, we've since purchased 2 others. And you got to understand, Hamilton, Ohio is about 3.5 hours away from where I live. But every Thursday I make a trek down here and to Hamilton, and it's really become our second home. And myself and my partners make that trip down every week, and it's pretty cool. I mean, we're definitely part of the community. But it's not just here in Hamilton. Again, you've got communities like this all over the Midwest, and these are how these projects come to life. You've got to have that fire burn in your belly to say, we've got a project, we're going to make it work, and you've got to be kind of fearless and say, we're going to make it work and make it work. And the biggest thing is educating the community members around you, keeping the city and city council informed, and with the foundation coming on board, that just filled in that financial gap that after the banks exited, they filled that gap, and that's what made this a reality.
Thanks, Steve. We're going to take a moment here to answer a couple questions that have been sent in currently, and the ones that we're going to answer right now are going to be the building-centric ones. Don't worry if we don't get them answered right now. Your question, I'm figuring ways to fit yours in as we continue our discussion. First off, who's the owner of the building currently?
Historic developers. It's myself and 4 other partners, and we bought buildings actually all throughout Ohio. We've got some up in Akron and Port Clinton and Warren and down here. So it's a group of 5 guys that went together, and we go in and rehab old historic buildings and kind of create a new sense of place.
And the second question about the building is, how many units are in it, both for the mixed use? 29
units mixed use, and no 2 are the same. And there's 4 retail spaces. And I'm proud to say all of our retail is completely leased up, 5-year leases, and we've got 26 of the 29 apartments leased, and we've got quite a few that are 5-year leases on that also.
And about the tax credits, a couple of people had questions on residual qualified rehab expenditures. Could you explain those to people?
Yeah, we call those the QREs, and it's basically what's available for credits like your refrigerator, your stove aren't qualified. You can throw those away in 5 years. It's literally just parts of the building that stay with the building. So it'd be all your electrical, all your plumbing, all your mechanical, electrical. Those are qualified QREs, and that's what we get the credits off of.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question is going to be, what would have happened with this set of buildings had Steve never come, had these deals not gotten off the ground? What would have been the ultimate outcome for these buildings? Whoever would like to answer that.
It could be another parking lot. And, the problem with parking lots is they only attract cars, and this would probably have been a somewhat empty parking lot. I mean, the activity since we've started this, and Mayor, maybe you can speak to that, but it's unbelievable the amount of activity that this has created. And I knew it would work here. We did it in downtown Canton, and literally what I did there brought the whole city back to life. And we're literally carrying that on here in Hamilton, and seeing is believing. It's that there's people all over the place downtown now.
The lights are on downtown after 5 o'clock and into the evening. This development we're in right now has been a springboard for other restorations and reuses of buildings. We've had a newspaper closed down here in the city of Hamilton. They moved to a suburban area for their offices, and now that building is coming back to life with ballet and education and the like. So if this building wasn't completed to the tune that it is right now, I think there would have been almost like a domino effect on some of the other projects. So we're very proud to have Steve here and his group, and I'm going to turn it over to one of our deputy city managers who is really a firebrand. He wants to say a few things, I believe, about what it would be like without this building.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, but I'm really convinced that this project represents the future of Hamilton. It really and truly is a springboard, and you talk about resolve and a fire in your belly. You'll never meet a more entrepreneurial developer with just an unbending resolve than Steve Coon and his partners, and we're just thrilled to have them here in the city because they're doing fantastic work. But having lights on upstairs, I think I don't even know how long it's been since we've had a product like this in our urban core. These residential units that we have here in this facility is really tremendous, and it's waking a lot of people up to the potential. And it's something that you see a lot in these old Midwestern cities where folks are trending back toward urban cores. And Hamilton really is Butler County's city. We're surrounded by a lot of suburban areas, so it's really nice to start to capitalize on what truly makes us unique. And a big part of that is our built environment and these beautiful structures that we have in our downtown.
I would just comment that, I think the city council that decided to purchase the buildings, whatever it's been, 13 years ago now, really need to be thanked, because otherwise it was going to be torn down. The previous owner said, I can't find a use for the building, I'm going to tear them down. And the city council was courageous enough to step up and spend some money and buy them. And they certainly took some flack for that because, there were a bunch of empty, kind of dilapidated buildings. And, it took a lot of vision and courage for them to do it. But I think as you've heard around the table, the result has certainly been worthwhile. So, again, somebody's going to have to be willing to make those first steps and be willing to jump off that mountain, so to speak.
Thank you all. We're going to take a little bit of turn in the discussion now and talk about the investment, both from the Community Foundation and from the city as well. Starting with the Community Foundation, do other community foundations, to your knowledge, invest in economic development? And what will help them get involved with that?
I would say yes. Certainly community foundations do get involved in projects like this, and I think we're seeing it more and more with community foundations. I I remember going to a conference of the community foundations maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and the topic was economic development and how community foundations can get involved. And I mean, the room was overflowing with people that wanted to hear about it. And you know, some of the discussion from the presenters was good, but there were a lot of people in the room just from community foundations who talked about projects like this or smaller or larger projects that they got involved with. And you know, it became one of those sessions where everybody was really just trying to get as much information as they can. I think, you know, as we see government's role sometimes shrinking now because of limited budgets and ability to do things. Banking has obviously changed over the years in what they're willing and able to do in terms of financing. There needs to be organizations to step up, and in some communities it's a community foundation. In others it might be an economic development corporation, in others it might be another group that does this. But I think finding somebody that's willing to take up the mantle and do that sort of thing in a community, I think is really necessary to make these things go forward.
And the biggest part of the city's investment in this project was really purchasing the property. Aside from some other things, you know, creating the TIF and some CDBG dollars, you know, we're really the third partner here. I can't say enough. If it was not for the sheer will of these developers and these partners, and the willingness and the vision of the community foundation to provide that critical gap financing, we wouldn't be sitting where we are today.
You know, one key element when you do economic development in any of these downtowns, it's one thing to have the city on board, but the city building department is the other. And these guys, I mean, you know, you got to understand, you're demoing buildings. Maybe you've got somebody going into part of it, but the other part you're still working on. And I mean, they didn't break any rules, but they understood what our goal was, and they literally came in and said, "Look, what can we do to help?" And that was the building department that we work with here in Hamilton is really second to none where I've ever worked, and I've said that publicly before. But they actually worked with us, and it was really nice. Instead of going in and telling you what you can't do, they were actually just the opposite. They were there to assist, and they wanted to see this happen just like anywhere else. So again, you need that community and city involvement, or it's just too tough of a struggle, and you're not going to make it.
Thank you all. Now, focusing on the city, you mentioned a TIF. Beyond the TIF, can you explain the TIF to people in a very simplistic way? And if there were any other sources of funding the city used? And a secondary question to that somebody else had, was there a return on investment for the city?
The tax increment financing was set up through legislation by the city council. When we were able to do it, the council, I think it was in early 2000s, TIF'd whatever we could, as well as did RIDs, which are the residential type of TIF. But we passed the legislation. We followed what our law department told us to do, and that does create some kind of a funding source. Return on investment, wow. When you see people living downtown, spending dollars downtown, buildings coming back to life, attracting other investors for projects, and attracting business to our downtown core. And as I've mentioned before we all got started, I think we're starting to become the talk of Southwestern Ohio in some ways because we're doing so many progressive things. But part of the progressiveness is reusing buildings and restoring what we have. So, but we have followed our law department. We've been aggressive, I think, in some financing instruments. So you want to add anything to that, Brandon?
I think the ROI question is really a great question, and I think a lot of governments are under the challenge right now to consider that return on investment. But this is not a 10-year ROI by any means. We are undoubtedly seeing a return on investment, but you have to really consider the alternative to this being flattened land where we're sitting right now, and what this building means to the future of Hamilton, and what has happened really, quite frankly, since. So yes, there is absolutely a return on investment, but it does require some patience. I mean, you should see what has happened to downtown as a result of these units filling up. It's really quite incredible.
Some people have been asking about this, and so what has, been the result of this beyond just the city's improvement? Has this fostered any sort of lasting development for the city? Is this a new model of thinking for the city, for the community foundation? Steve, if you want to weigh into this as well, whoever would like to start first.
Just to add to what Steve said, once you've developed one project with a partner very successfully, you turn to that partner for other projects. And of course, working with Steve and his group and the Hamilton Community Foundation, we have turned to them quite a bit since the success of this project. It's kind of being a baseball manager, and you hand the ball over to your best closer at the end of the game to close out the game. Well, the partnership that's developed here as a result of the successful Mercantile Lofts and these other projects, the reutilization of the newspaper building is it's just an example of successful partnership that you want to try and repeat and repeat and repeat, because we're comfortable working with these entities. And as Brandon said, we're like the third partner in this project. Without the other two, this would just be an empty building. We have other empty buildings in this town too.
One other kind of project that grew out of this is, while the community, it led us to work with a number of entities, some of the local banks, the city, the Chamber of Commerce, and some other to come up with what we're calling the Core Fund, which is a gap financing entity that's going to be in place and available to provide gap financing for a number of developers as they come and do commercial residential projects within a certain area we've defined as the core, which is essentially the downtown business district with a little bit of additional property attached to it. So that's actually in place now, will actually be up and running by December 1st.
Thank you, guys. Next question is kind of an open-ended kind of question for anyone who'd like to answer. But what advice do you have for a respective counterpart of yourself in another community to go about establishing a relationship like this?
I would say you pick out your marquee building, the one I call them the ground zero buildings. That's where you start and build from there. And once you start that, I try to make an alliance. You have to make an alliance with the city, and try to get a relationship with the banks. If the banks aren't out there, because you're gonna have to spend your own money too. This isn't a thing that you just go in and borrow all the money. You have to upfront just about all the money. The tax credits are reimbursement and all that, but you got to be fearless. And like I said, I drive almost 4 hours every week each way just to come down here to make sure this is on track and working out. But it's quite enjoyable too.
So from the government, I guess it's building these relationships is about being accessible at all times to these folks who are investing in your community. I think that's critical. And the other part of that would be having a vision and being sure that your partners share that vision and that you're all marching to the same beat.
I probably wouldn't give advice to other community foundations, because there's kind of an expression that if you've seen one community foundation, you've seen one community foundation, because every community foundation is different. It's responsive to the needs of their community. This may well work in a community that you're in. It may not. But my encouragement to people trying to do this would be to find the partner, whether it's the community foundation, whether it's another group in the community, whether it's the chamber, whomever it is, to reach out until you can find that partner. And if it's not there, maybe you need to invent the partner, which is kind of what we did with the Core Fund.
Thank you all. Kind of a related question that we've been seeing a couple people ask, and I'm just going to kind of make it a vague question instead of specific to individual projects that have been asked. But some communities, they're getting to the point where they want to start a tax credit project. What advice do you have getting them connected with the right people to get those projects off the ground?
Like I said, every community has got attorneys, accountants, even architects that claim that, look, we're capable of doing this. But again, you want to get the right accountant not somebody that you're paying hours and hours so they can learn how to do this. I would go back to every one of them and say, if you can't show me 10 or 12 successful projects that you've done, you're probably not the one that I want to start out with. And there are good restoration architects out there, good architects and accountants that, and there was a handful of them that everybody uses, so they'd be pretty easy to find. But don't get, again, these tax credits come at the end, so don't experiment with somebody that thinks they can do it. Go with guys that are proven, and that pretty much guarantees your success.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to ask some of these questions, the remaining ones that people have been sending in, kind of in a logical order, but they're mostly revolving around the project. So to start off with, who is contributing to the core fund?
The Community Foundation is one of the founders and investors in the core fund. We also have a commitment from a local bank to put money in, and we've got actually requests out that look very favorable, but they're not confirmed yet with several other banks. But the goal for us was to establish a $5 million pool of funds that would be available to provide gap financing for projects in the community.
Thank you. A kind of a related question for Steve here is, was a nonprofit partner aside from the Hamilton Foundation involved in the project or considered?
No, I didn't really. I didn't really go down that road. Actually, I wasn't even planning on using the foundation again. I thought I had all my ducks in a row, and you know, a lot of times when you start these projects, I tell people they die about 7 deaths before they finally come to life, and literally that between the banks and our tax credit partner had both walked away after they had committed, and we had. I was kind of forced to, well, what are we going to do next? And luckily the Hamilton Community Foundation trusted us and believed in us and stepped up to the plate and made it a reality.
And these 2 questions for you, Steve. First one is, how long did the development process of this project take from start to finish?
It seemed like a long time. After we really got our teeth into it, about 2.5 years, because we did it in a phase 1 and a phase 2. You got to remember there was a lot of demo and a lot of structural rebuild, and that took a lot. This building was just about right on the brink of, I mean, it had great bones, but there was so much damage. We were constantly going back and reassessing structural issues, but it finally came together. But it was literally right at the brink. If we would have waited 1 more year, we probably wouldn't have been able to save the building just because of all the roofs.
And secondly, somebody's asking about when you're going through the process as a developer, making your selections for what projects you're going to undertake. Is there a magic number of units that you're looking for when you're selecting a building for this type of project? 5, 10 units, whatever works?
You know what? It's when you utilize tax credits, you really need to be, I think, a minimum square footage of about 50,000 square feet. Anything under that, your soft costs overpower everything else, and just to get a sense of scale, you need at least 50,000 square feet of total project to make it work. And ideally, 75 to 80,000 is really about right in the wheelhouse of where it should be, and then you can spread out those soft costs from all those units, because really your soft costs are really I mean, they're there, and when you can spread them out over more units, it brings your cost down drastically.
And for this project, was prevailing wage used in the construction?
You know what? We're a union contractor, Coon Restoration, so any restoration work that I did, everybody got their union scale. But as far as you know, the other, we just went with best, most capable bid. And like I said, Historic Developers owns a project, and they weren't signed to any union agreements. We just went with the best, most capable, and we really didn't even ask if anybody was open shop or not. It's just if they had the ability to do the work.
Thank you, Steve. And now we have a few government-related questions here. The first was, what was the reaction from the citizenry when the city purchased a building? Was it a negative outcome, or did it come out positive overall after some time?
I wasn't on council back then, but I've been a resident of Hamilton for a long, long time. The initial reaction by those who wanted to preserve historic structures was all positive, but there were some slower years with the project, and some citizens did question the project during that time. But we did encourage them to have vision, to be patient, and it all got paid off and with a great reward.
Thank you, Mayor. The second question, starting out here with a quote from Richard Moe, former head of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, said, "Preservation is simply having the good sense to hold on to things that are well designed, link us with the past in a meaningful way, and have plenty of good use left in them." So for the elected officials present, what messages do you have for other mayors, councilmen, et cetera, listening today that would help them understand that preservation is an economic tool?
As I mentioned, I've lived here all my life, and when I walk down these streets, it's like walking down a street in the 1950s. The buildings are all close to the street. The word bones, I've learned, is an architectural restoration word, and I guess I knew that all along, just didn't apply the word bones to it. But we've got some great structures, beautiful architecture. It makes you just want to get out of your car and walk down the street to see what we do have in Hamilton. I'm sure many of your cities are a lot like Hamilton. But the reward is seeing something preserved, see something restored, see something reused instead of being knocked down, turned into a parking lot or more of a modern look. But we're lucky we've got these great historic buildings, and the city of Hamilton is working on keeping them and bring them back to life again.
I am not an elected official, but I will speak from the city's perspective. We look at these buildings and our built environment as a serious differentiator. When considering our more suburban neighbors, and I've talked to administrators there, they would kill to have what we have. We have a beautiful river bisecting our city, and just unrivaled architecture between Cincinnati and Dayton. The city of Hamilton is the second largest city in the tri-state Cincinnati MSA. And we're really proud of being a city, and we can't try to be the suburban areas. We are a city. We have this historic, beautiful built environment, and these structures cannot be replicated today. Saving them is critical.
What I'd like to comment on. I'd like to take it a step further. Look at all the these new shopping malls that have been built in the last 5-6 years. Easton Center, Legacy Village, Crocker Park. I mean, they all look just like downtown Hamilton with the storefronts and facades. I mean, it's special and unique. That's what people connect to. And when you've got the buildings like they do, like in most cities here in Ohio and the Midwest, you've got to celebrate that. That gives people a sense of place. You're not going to replicate that in a new built community. I mean, you drive down south, down along the freeway, every exit you get off, it's Anywhere USA. It's the same shopping malls, the same gas stations, the same. I mean, you shut your eyes and you could be in literally 1,000 different cities. They all look the same, but that's what makes these special and unique, and that's what's going to bring people back. And the infrastructure is already back here. Just think of what you save in infrastructure cost. It's already here. And, we're going to make a walkable community and something that, people are going to be proud of. I tell people all the time, we don't have a parking problem. We've got a walking problem. And, it makes it a very walkable community, and it makes people part of their downtown neighborhood. And that's what's coming up everywhere in the state of Ohio, where they've done these market rate housing projects, people with disposable income. They're making them walkable neighborhoods that everybody's proud of.
Thank you, Steve. We're going to take a short break here to give you some announcements. If you have any final questions, please send them in, and we'll have those final questions and concluding comments in a second. To start off with, Heritage Ohio would like to thank both the City of Hamilton employees today, the Hamilton Community Foundation, and Steve with Coon Restoration and Sealants, for agreeing to do this webinar today. It's been a fun webinar to do. Definitely different than we normally do, and I think it's been a great way to educate people not only on what great things are happening here in Hamilton, Ohio, but what good things could be happening in your communities as well with some nice development. To start off with, as Heritage Ohio, as the official historic preservation and Main Street organization, we foster economic development and sustainability through preservation of historic buildings, revitalization of downtowns and neighborhood commercial districts, and the promotion of cultural tourism. So if you enjoyed today's webinar, please think about becoming a member of Heritage Ohio, and you can find out more information about that on our website, which is www.heritageohio.org. And also we have a few upcoming events coming up. In 2 weeks, we are going to be in Mount Vernon for our final revitalization workshop. Start that over with. Final of the year workshop revitalization series event. It's going to be on November 7th and 8th in Mount Vernon, as I said. And that's going to be covering solutions to deal with blighted buildings in downtown. So solutions that may be outside the norm that your community can use to start tackling some of those issues. And secondly, our next webinar is going to be on November 14th at 1 p.m. We have one final question. Oh, it's a comment. Thank you, Debbie, for thanking us today. We've greatly enjoyed it. And as many of the comments that come in, people are definitely a fan of Steve as well. And so if you have any questions involving if you have any projects coming up, if you would like an assistance, you can definitely always contact Heritage Ohio. Once again, our website with all of our contact information is www.heritageohio.org. So the final step here, I guess, would be to have any closing comments that anyone present would like to make. Anything you'd like to say about the project, any future advice you want to give out to anyone, whatever you feel like to comment on.
I'd just like to say, look around in your community. There's a Mercantile Lofts in every community all throughout the state. And don't listen to other people when they say that can't be done, we shouldn't do that. Again, you've got to fight through that. If you've got a building with good bones, you want to bring life back to your community, you should really take a hard look at some of your structures. And, I mean, that's what brings people back. People want to reconnect. And if you go and tear down all these buildings, they're not going to have anything to connect with. And again, it just kind of turns the community into Anywhere USA. The quick fix is let's just tear it down and we'll hope something happens. Well, I'm telling you what, that's not the answer. I believe what we do is the answer, and it literally brings life back into the community. And seeing is believing. Come to downtown Hamilton. They got some great restaurants here, and really come and see what we're talking about, and you'll be amazed. And like I said, it could be Hamilton. I've done stuff in downtown Canton, and they've literally brought both cities back to life, and we're looking to do that everywhere. So look around in your community and take an inventory of what you got, and don't be afraid to dream.
I would just conclude by thanking Steve and his group for the vision and for their efforts in this project. Again, Steve mentioned he's from Canton. He's not from Hamilton, but he came here, saw the building, had the vision, and put it into place. Thank the city for getting involved. And again, just encourage people to look for partners, because that's what it takes. I mean, doing these projects solo is really difficult. But when you get a community to come together and you get the right people to come together, doesn't mean it's not going to be a challenge, but it can be done, and the rewards are outstanding.
Just say, love your city, love your downtown. Like Steve said, if you get out into the periphery of Hamilton and some of the newer development, you could be anywhere. So identify those structures that make your city, and fight like hell for them.
All right. One final question we have here. We have for Steve. How did you hear about Hamilton? Why did you come here to begin with?
Again, I said it was an architect friend of mine that I believe I think the city of Middletown right next door. He was doing some work for them, and then he had somehow gotten involved in Hamilton, which is the community right next door. And when he saw these projects, I just finished a project just about identical to this in downtown Canton, and he felt it was right in my wheelhouse, and was excited about me coming downtown here. And boy, after seeing all those pigeons and the roofs caved in, I just thought this is my kind of project.
Good answer, Steve. Finally, this webinar will be available after I clean it up. Once again, I do apologize for the technical issues we had in the middle of the webinar. The servers at Citrix occasionally do slow down. It's a known issue with them. They're still always working on finding a great solution to it. But lunchtime is a very popular time for webinars, so occasionally some blips do happen. So I will be cleaning up the audio so you won't have dead pauses when you review it in the future. Give me a couple days to do that. It'll definitely be up within the week. I'll email everyone on the webinar, plus anyone who is not in attendance but registered. If you want me to send it to anyone else, you can always email me at dmiles, D-M-I-L-E-S, at heritageohio.org, and I'll get them listed on when I send out the link to everyone. Thank you all. Our next webinar is November 14th. Have a good afternoon.